Captain Silas Hopkins was born in Monmouthshire, Wales, United Kingdom on August 9, 1741 to Ephraim and Martha Hopkins. He married Mary Swayze, who was born 1743 in Roxbury, New Jersey. She was the daughter of Israel Swayze and Elizabeth Seward. The marriage of Silas and Mary was on May 5, 1763 in Sussex, New Jersey, in British colonial America. Captain Silas Hopkins' father and mother, Abijah Hopkins and Elizabeth King, were both born in Suffolk County, New York. Silas had 8 other siblings and they were all born in New York or New Jersey. Only Captain Silas Hopkins was born outside of British colonial America. There is no documentation on why he was born in the UK. Silas's father, Abijah Hopkins, served as lieutenant and captain in the 2nd Regiment, Sussex County, New Jersey troops. This was a new regiment raised in 1775 for the Continental Army. Silas's father had military experience. In fact, Captain Silas's grandfather, William Hopkins, born in 1659, was also a native of British colonial America. Silas's great-grandfather was Giles Hopkins, and he came on the Mayflower in 1620 at the age of 13 years old. Captain Silas Hopkins was the father of Mehitabel Hopkins DeWitt, Aziba Hopkins Hagar, Silas Hopkins, Joseph Hopkins, Elizabeth Hopkins Eastman, Captain Benjamin Hopkins, Ephraim Hopkins, Caleb Hopkins, Gabriel Hopkins. Silas was remembered as a good specimen of an English country gentleman with a cocked hat, knee breeches, long stockings, low shoes with large silver buckles, recalled by granddaughter Aziba Hogan Gilliland. While we have no portraits of Captain Silas, we can imagine him with this AI-generated picture. He belonged first to the colonial army under George Washington. There is no documentation of his history with the American Patriot Forces. He changed his allegiance to the crown under King George III in 1776. He was part of the New Jersey Volunteers, also known as Jersey Volunteers, Skinners, Skinner's Corps, and Skinner's Greens due to their green wool uniform coats. They were a British provincial military unit of Loyalists, raised for service by Cortlandt Skinner during the American Revolutionary War. Silas was made a captain on December 14, 1776. Silas's father, Abijah Hopkins, was in the colonial army. So was Silas for a few years, as we mentioned earlier. The fact that Silas changed allegiance must have been very difficult and the relations between them must have been very frigid. It can be speculated that since Silas was the only child born in the United Kingdom, that is why he switched to the British. Remember, Silas's siblings were all born in New Jersey or New York while he was the only one born in the UK, for some unknown reason. Silas served a total of 7 years in the service of the Crown. However, at one point in his military career, he was captured by the American Army. Captain Silas Hopkins was imprisoned for 3 years and fined £1,000 by the American Patriots. He was also given a pardon from George Washington. His wife was née Mary Swayze, who was related to William Seward of the White House, as his mother, actually grandmother, was also Mary Swayze. The two Marys were cousins. The speculation of Captain Silas Hopkins' pardon after 3 years of imprisonment was because of the intercession of Seward family on Captain Silas's wife-family relations. It can also be suggested that Captain Silas was part of the colonial army under George Washington for 2 years before switching allegiances. This may have had some influence for the pardon along with his family coming to America on the Mayflower. The £1,000 fine for his release was a lot of money back then, and since he was jailed for 3 years, it can be assumed that the Hopkins family history as far back as the Mayflower and his current family must have had some sort of wealth to come up with the fine. His father and grandfather were in New Jersey and New York for a few generations along with his great-grandfather being a passenger on the Mayflower. He had some cash in terms of early American history and wealth. Before and after the war, Silas was a drover by trade, driving horses, cattle, and other animals from New Jersey to Niagara. In the summer of 1787, Captain Silas Hopkins, along with his son, Silas Hopkins Jr., along with 12 or 13 other young men drove cattle from New Jersey to Niagara. The party came to Newton Point, thence to Horseheads, thence Catherine's Town at the head of Seneca Lake. From there they went to Canandaigua, Canandaigua, and from thence upon the Indian Trail via Canaugus. The Great Bend of Tonawanda Indian Village to Niagara route up the Susquehanna, then to Tioga, which was in the track of Sullivan's army. After that almost wholly upon Indian trails. They saw the last white inhabitant at Newton Point. At this period, 9/10 of the settlers were Butler's Rangers. They had all got lands from the British government with 2 years' supply of provisions and were otherwise favored. The New Jersey drovers sold their cattle principally to them and the garrisons at Queenston and Niagara. Silas and Mary, with some of their children, came to Canada in 1797. He knew many families along his drover route over the years and influenced some to eventually come to Upper Canada, like the Van Normans, amongst them. In 1800 he petitioned for land and in 1810 received Lot 3, Concession 1 in Nelson Township, which is currently East Burlington. Hopkins was the first person to draw a location ticket for Nelson Township. He sold the property 2 years later. Silas, now being a widower, at retirement age 65, he must have left the American colony with reluctance, especially when some of his grown children remained behind and his father and grandfather were settlers in America. He settled in East Flamborough and died on November of 1818. He was buried at the Hopkins family homestead in East Flamborough, currently part of Hamilton, Ontario. His body was later reinterred in the Hamilton Cemetery, where it rests to this day. Thank you for watching this video and please subscribe to this channel.